Interesting. So our results came in, 58 results. Customer service was one of the biggest impacts that they see as an AI use case. Over to you.
Thanks, Angel. Thanks for that good introduction. This is working, great. And those are interesting poll results, which we will discuss at some point during the panel. Now, I don't want to spend too long talking at the beginning because I think I've got the best topic of the day to discuss, one of the hottest certainly, and I know from having a sort of preparatory call with these guys that, believe me, keeping it down to an hour is going to be my challenge, I think. But I did look at a study by Boston Consulting Group and MIT Sloan Management Review just on the gap between AI, reality, and expectations. Now, about 10% of financial services exec thinks that AI is having a big effect today. 65% think it will in 5 years' time. Now, a few other numbers I liked as well. 75% of executives believe AI will enable them to move into new businesses, and even more of them believe that AI will give their companies an advantage or some sort of competitive advantage. But, and this is the great but only 20% have incorporated AI in some offerings or processes so far, and only 5% have extensively put artificial intelligence into the way they work. So we're going to look at the hype versus reality today. And first of all, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to start with telling me a little bit about what AI means to you, because one of the things we found is the definition isn't always easy and how people are using it. Brian, I'm going to come to you first. Tell me about AI from your perspective.
Sure, thanks so very much, Jennifer, and thanks to Thomson Reuters for inviting us here. So my background is I'm a lawyer who was in a bank, and now I'm in a startup. So from that point of view, have seen the evolution from those perspectives. So in my mind, AI is three different things. So one is it really can help with the automation of processes. So whether it's in banking or in law, there's a lot of drawl that needs to be dealt with in terms of documentation and data. That's where the AI can really help. Secondly, banking and law are in the knowledge economy. And that's where AI can really add, looking into, delving into areas that humans cannot over a long period of time. So then the third area, frankly, is in relation to a smart faucet, if you like, of the new oil. So people call data the new oil. So, but what you have now is a smart faucet to actually, to mix my metaphors, to look at the new oil and to add insights that humans, again, previously couldn't deal with. Now, that being said, so that's in the big picture. The reality in terms of applications may be a slightly different story, but I'm sure we'll get into that later on.
Thank you. That was a good start. Pascal, I wanted to come to you. This is your work. Where do you think we're at now?
Yeah, since I'm a professor, I'm going to give you an academic definition. So AI is a subject that's taught in most universities with a computer science department. And what the subjects we teach in AI, of course, there's the introduction to AI, the introduction concepts, but also computer vision and natural language processing, sometimes speech recognition, and machine learning. So these are the major components of what we consider AI. And I would say today, machine learning is at the core of modern AI systems, which is not the case in the 80s and before. There were expert systems that were programmed by humans. Knowledge was programmed in and hard-coded in. But today, all AI systems must have a machine learning component so that the system will learn in some ways similar to humans, but actually it's not really exactly human-like. So, and it should manifest some kind of a semblance of machine intelligence that's similar to human, for example, recognizing speech, doing machine translation, understanding language, and being able to recognize pictures. So certain things like predicting the future of the market is not necessarily AI. You could do that with linear regression models that are not really AI. There's no machine learning. So, and search engines are not considered AI, for example. So this is the academic or research-oriented kind of definition. When people say they are AI researchers or AI practitioners, people who program and design the algorithms, this is what we mean.
Can I ask you, what first drew you into AI? How did you get into this field and become such an expert? You get quoted quite a lot now in the press.
Oh, you asking me? When I was young, I was a curious kid. I was into magic. I like magic, and one day when I was 6 or 7, I saw a book that explains the physics behind magic, and I realized there are always physical explanations of things that are magical. And I got very interested in physics. And then when I was 8, I think, I read a science fiction book about the future, where there will be a cure for the flu, but also more importantly, there will be robots, and we will be able to shop from home. So a lot of this are reality today, but I was drawn to robots, and I wanted to make intelligent machines. And I have always been a science fiction fan. A lot of people in AI were comic book fans, and so that sort of fueled our curiosity and our drive to work on things that seem intelligent. And when I started nearly 30 years ago, I got into the field of speech recognition. And I remember we were doing recognition on PTK, like these phoneme recognitions, compared to today where we have speech recognition systems that are at the human level or even better than humans. So we've made a lot of progress in the last few decades, and I feel like I've been very fortunate to be part of the workforce for AI. But I have to say that up until maybe 5, 6 years ago, AI was not a popular area at all with students, and this is leading to today's shortage of AI knowledge workers. Because people were not that interested. People didn't believe it, that it will work, and so there have been quite a few AI winters, and leading to, today we're seeing maybe AI summer. We always say after summer there's fall and there will be winter again. So we're trying very hard to get ahead of the curve and this time what's different though from what I've seen is that this is the AI summer where we are seeing a lot of applications finally. That it's not just theoretical, it's not just science fiction, we're actually seeing a lot of applications. So the life cycle of AI research to AI deployment, not just applications, has been very drastically shortened in the last 2 years, I would say. So,
Thank you. That was good to know, and I like the interest in magic.
Yeah.
That's very cool.
So a real AI system, if it performs really well, we always say that it should seem like magic.
Huayi, I want to come to you and just away from the magic and into the reality.
Okay. So going back to the reality, from my background, I joined a program called computational linguistics back in early 2000. And that's when Noam Chomsky was like the god of linguistics. And we learned a lot of these theories on linguistics, how to do text-to-semantic translations using computational mathematics. But on the other hand, one of the professors in my university really inspired me on something that has nothing to do with linguistics, and it's called the statistics. So what we did was using statistical analysis and go from there to analyze the relationship between the syntax and the semantics and come up with what's called the text-to-semantics and machine understanding. So after that, I started getting into artificial intelligence. And that's really textbook understanding of artificial intelligence. Basically, we started doing machine learnings, how to expand using non-statistical methods and continuing on. But I never finished the program, unfortunately, because real world really caught up. And I got involved in something very interesting as well. It's called the algorithmic trading. So at the time, algorithmic trading was really, really popular. It used a lot of statistical models, logical regression, coming up with models to try to predict what's going to happen in the financial market, especially in the near future, which usually means in 5 to 10 minutes. Is the market going up? Is the market going down? So I got involved on what's called a sell-side algo trading, and that's actually what led me to electronic trading in Daiwa Capital Market. Sell-side trading means we're trying to improve the market efficiency by helping the clients to reduce cost rather than increasing profit. So the stock picking is done by the client. Now, if the client wants to execute a huge amount of order, he can dump it on the market, which impacts the market, impacts his performance, or he can execute through an algo, which slowly place the order into the market. So how does this have anything to do with AI, right? Anything that has to do with prediction obviously has something to do with AI. So from a statistical mechanism, we're now progressing into using what's called LSTM models on the RNNs within the deep learning network to try to improve our prediction rates going forward. And it's really not just pure AI. We still have to do statistical analysis before it has been applied to the AI deep learning or general learning perspective. Because we have to do clusterings on exactly what instruments fits in what profile, what do you do with the models, what kind of training, what kind of models do you use to predict what type of instruments. So there's a lot of stuff happening in this space, and we can talk about more afterwards.
We will do, don't worry.
Interesting enough, the most successful hedge fund in the world today, Renaissance Technologies, founded by a bunch of guys who were at IBM, who convinced me to go into natural language processing in the early 90s. They don't use deep learning at all. Just to give you that.
Like I said, we could go way beyond an hour discussing all of this. Connie, coming to you, talk about AI from your perspective.
Well, I'm probably not going to repeat everyone that I've said. I'm not going to give you a theoretical or scientific or technical answer on that ground. But just to reflect on what you just said, I agree with you. Risk and compliance is really an application for AI. From our perspective, from Microsoft perspective, we are a technology service provider. We looked at AI as it's going to be a disruption for any processes, any application that you're going to do for all kinds of life. Whether you are in vertical like financial services that I cover, or whether you are in a cross domain like the sales or process or robotics. I think that's how we looked at AI is going to be a very important piece. But I think fundamentally it's a technology, something that helps solve a problem. And I think from our perspective, it's just one element of how we can solve a problem. The fundamental thing is about data, to your point. To me, data is more the important thing. If you don't have data, you can't learn anything. And then the machine cannot be smarter than humans, for example. So I think what we really need to do from our perspective is how can you actually have a platform that can allow you to collect millions and a lot of data, whether it's you own it or you don't own it. And then how can you apply the tools? When we call AI, we actually call democratizing AI, meaning that how can I make the tools easy for you? Because as our mission is to empower you as a person or organization to achieve more. So AI is going to empower you to solve a very pressing problem. The problem could be doing risk, understanding. We just did a case study on understanding global warming and how it actually can help you be reducing your vulnerability. So I think there's a lot of things that AI can do, but fundamentally, it's the tools that can help you develop and actually make yourself better, make better decisions, have better insights to your customers, and be able to learn and improve over time with a scientific background behind it so that you can do a better job to predict or prevent. I think that's really how we see it and how we can actually allow you to have all the tools, whether you look at facial recognition, whether you look at speech-to-text recognition, or any of the algorithms. So I mean, it's a very wide spectrum of what we can do with data, but fundamentally, I think data is key to anything that we talked about.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful putting it in that context too. Now I confess that I'm a late arrival and looking at AI, as you'll be able to tell from my questions, given the level of expertise we have on the panel here. But it seems from looking at the study I quoted earlier that I'm certainly not the only one. Another finding from that was the largest companies are the most likely to have an AI strategy, but only half of them do. Question for the panelists is really, should companies all have an AI strategy? Is that too broad? Does that lead to the headless chicken approach where everyone runs around saying we should have one? And then how do you get to having an AI strategy? Who'd like to go first? Connie.
It's an interesting question, and I will use the same analogy to answer, to give you another dilemma. A lot of people was asking, do I have a cloud strategy? Same. The fundamental thing is you don't have a strategy. You don't wake up one day in the morning and say, I'm going to buy some cloud. You don't wake up in the morning and say, I'm going to do an AI project today. It's not starting from there. I think it starts from solving a problem, and that's brings to my question is, what is your strategy of being disrupted right now, heavily? How are you going to come better and do a better job? For example, I mean, should we say a very nice thing, virtual banking, open API is happening, and you have to open up because the other services need to actually be, collaborating, or you need to open up so that you can then bring on new services, as what the European regulators are saying. How are you going to react to that? What's your strategy? And then technology is an enabler for you to do that. If AI solves that problem, so be it. If the data brings that I don't need an AI, a linear regression can do it, so be it. I don't think it matters that I have to have an AI element to what I'm trying to solve, but I should have a technology or a strategy of how I'm going to bring my shop up to a digital world today that we're all facing, and what technology can enable me to do that. And it can vary from anything. It can be cloud, it can be data, it can be AI, it can be other things. So that's my take on it.
Pascal?
Yeah, I would say that if you have an existing mature business model and you intend to make incremental or progress on it, and automation and AI can help you, I think that's the lowest hanging fruit. That's the easiest thing to do. But if you feel that your business is not quite competitive enough, and you might have a risk of losing to your competitors, I'm trying to put the stress in you, then you should know that AI is going to disrupt the industry, especially the financial industry. And it perhaps is helpful for you to have a vision of an AI strategy, if not the strategy itself, meaning that what you're doing here, trying to understand better about where the future of the technology is going, what your competitors are doing, your competitors here, your competitors in China, because they are not waiting, competitors in different markets with different regulations. I think from what I have seen in different markets, the Chinese are really the fastest runner, and they don't really hesitate or hold back, and they all have AI strategies. And I think you should then, prepare yourselves. It's not easy to have an AI strategy. I always say that every company should have a chief AI officer, but there are not so many people who can be in that position. So maybe the CIO, maybe it's the CEO, maybe it's the CTO, I would say, to have, to become, half of these AI strategists.
Sorry, Brian, just following up quickly on that, Pascal. You said that, Chinese companies are the fastest adopters. Why would you say that is? Is it lack of legacy system?
I think the number one thing is lack of a legacy system, and the number two thing is because it's China. They see opportunity, they squeeze. I mean, it's just Chinese. It's the nature of the Chinese entrepreneurial spirit and the market, because they've seen the success of their predecessors, like the Alibabas and all. So internet business is already super mature in China. Nobody starts an internet business today. So what's the next opportunity? Everybody in China sees it's AI. So from small startups to the major internet companies to the banks, they all have this strategy. It doesn't mean they all have good strategy though. So there's still opportunities for us here.
Brian.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to add a little bit to what Pascal was saying. So I think it's important, number one, to bifurcate between the established players and the newcomers. So in China, what you have is super rapid prototyping, right? China time things, especially of newcomers who didn't really have the incumbents. Their incumbents are the tech companies, not the banks, the tech companies. So it's a different mindset. And then I think to build upon what has been discussed, it's really, I would call it about AI awareness rather than strategy yet. Before you have strategy, you need awareness. And what I find with a lot of middle management and senior management, there's not enough awareness of what AI can do as a new technology and the disruptive force, but also the governance aspects. Once a lot of BUs are now trying to say, hey, somebody else is doing a chatbot, we should do one too, right? Somebody's introducing this, we should add that. So, but companies from board level and C-suite level understanding as they start having to think about this, what elements within a complex, large organization that they need to pull together. So I'd start with the word awareness, and some are further along that journey than others.
I think that's an excellent point, because from an established corporation perspective, is you have to think about what's the P&L. you have to spend this money to start a AI initiative. What is the profit you're going to make from this? Or what kind of savings would you have to reduce and help your organizations or help your stakeholders, for example, the investors in your company, to achieve higher returns? So usually how it starts is either you have a very AI-centric, very technology-driven CEO. He pushes it down from top to the bottom. Or you can start from the bottoms up, where you start to engage the local universities, where they have talented students, where they have really interesting research reports. For example, in Japan, the Tokyo University is doing a lot of research on AI. And Japan is an interesting country because people are getting older, and there's not enough young generation to fill the workforce gap. So even from the government's perspective, they want robotic process automation. You can almost say AI is not robotic process automation, but it does have a play in it as well. Now, on the other hand, this trickles down from a government perspective to the CEO perspective, and then down to the workforce level, whereas workforce currently are not hired to do AI research. We're just not. We're hired to do our specific jobs. For example, we're hired to build the algo system, we're hired to do the tradings, and anything outside of that will require additional training, additional learning. Now, how do we do that? Is we cooperate with companies, for example, like Reuters or Microsoft or Google or AWS, and we start to set up certain research environments. And once we have a research environment, we get people more interested. We get them to start prototyping on things that will deliver an actual business value and revert back to the CEO or the decision makers on exactly what is our AI strategy. Because you cannot realistically expect a firm's middle to high level management to fully understand what AI can deliver for the future.
Okay, so what you're saying is somebody needs to go, an AI initiative needs to start from the very top and come down. We need to educate more no?
As well as bottoms up. So from the bottom up, there will always be technologists who are interested in this and has been exploring this. So you can create prototypes that will help to create the business value and then propagate up. But overall, the company has to have an innovation, a research environment that will foster your proof of concept being created.
So in UST, we collaborate with quite a number of financial institutions here, and doing research, doing what we do best, which is research, but with an angle, with an application towards the financial industry. I think this is a way for financial companies here to bootstrap their AI strategy and their AI effort. In China and in the US and even in Europe, there are a lot of companies that create their own AI labs. Basically, they have their own, and they poach all these top researchers from around the world to lead their AI labs. In China, almost, actually all the top companies have that, even Foxconn, which you wouldn't think needed AI, but they just poached one of the top AI researchers in the world, Andrew Ng, to lead their AI lab. So there is, if we don't have an AI strategy in Hong Kong, so I have been invited to advise the Japanese government, the Indian government, the American government, and so on and so forth. I have not been invited to advise, even the Chinese government. I've never been invited so far. It's coming, I've been told, to advise the Hong Kong government on its AI strategy. I was invited to talk in Singapore as well. They have they have the AI.SG effort. China, needless to say, they have this national priority of becoming the AI superpower by 2030. So it's top down, it's bottom up, it's everywhere. But Hong Kong, I just feel like our industries maybe, and the government have been maybe too comfortable. So I try to scare all of you into action. Because if you don't do something, if you're not running, getting up to run, Hong Kong will lose. I mean, this is the reality.
Following up on that, thanks, Pascal. Have you, when you've worked with the large incumbents, the guys that are slow, have you seen an approach within the company that works particularly well? What sort of engagement do you need from whom to really get this going?
So, so coming back to what Brian said, the initiative has to, so the top management has to buy into this, meaning the top partners, the CEOs, the CTOs, right? They have to be the ones who buy in. And then there should be middle management who are actually technically savvy, preferably graduates from our university, who are now working in this financial industry. So they actually have a computer science background. And it's easier for them to learn about what's going on right now. And they come to us and they say, "That's, professor, used to be your student. Can we work together again?" I thought that kind of collaboration is, in general, very productive, because they know what we can do. We kind of know what they can and cannot do, and there's a collaboration. So we use their data. We even write proposals together. It's possible. So that kind of collaboration, I think, is more productive.
Brian?
Sure. So totally agree. It's both. It's top down and it's bottom up. So some of the initiatives that we're launching to try to encourage that is for FinTech Education Week, we launched our first make your own chatbot workshops. The idea there being using, frankly, frameworks, which Pascal said that's not real AI, right? But there are some, so it's actually a Google-based platform, and there's an Azure-based like as well. So these are some of the big companies have these platforms.
API.ai?
API.ai, exactly. So we use API.ai, now called Dialogflow, right? Where within literally 3-4 hours, somebody can learn to create their first chatbot. Right? And so the idea there is once you start learning and understanding what goes in, what comes out, what aspects are frankly a little bit black boxy, and what that means, then it really allows senior management and board members to understand, oh, this is what it's about. It also means, garbage in, garbage out, so they learn to be more sensitive to the data. They learn you can add personalities to your chatbot depending on how you want to program it. So this is kind of an awareness process from the top down that we started launching. The other element that we're trying out, frankly, is a hackathon, right? So Hong Kong doesn't have that many real hackathons. So we, at the end of this month, frankly, in collaboration with Thomson Reuters, we're holding a legal tech, reg tech hackathon hosted by Thomson Reuters. And the idea is to bring domain experts, in this case in law and compliance, because dealing with the compliance type issues, together with the coders, right? So we're outreaching to the developer community, whether it's in the blockchain community, but also the AI, to see whether they can come together to create new solutions to problem solve. Now, can we the problem with AI is, can you really expect something over a weekend? Yeah, a little bit tricky. But there are platforms like, I've been a judge at some of the Microsoft student hackathons, and it's incredible. Within a weekend, the students can create something using the Azure model. So there are ways to embrace a lot of people who may feel, oh, this tech stuff is a little bit too technical, to come into the tent, to embrace it, to learn, and find new use cases for some of the technologies.
You've almost convinced a dinosaur like me that this is possible. Right. Connie, I wanted to come back to you, and your point on data, the garbage in, garbage out point. That sounds to me like this is something that companies need to be more aware of. Is there a remedy? How big? Okay, I'm trying to ask about data. How big a problem is it for companies, and how many really get that they don't have the information that could work towards implementing something on the AI scale?
Let me transfer the question to the audience. Raise your hand if you think you have a big data problem in your shop today.
Okay, there's more hands hovering around there.
Okay. So I think it's interesting when you talked about that, because when you hear some of our CEOs and top down, the new mission statement from some of the banks basically say, I need to be a data company. I just happen to have a bank license. So you think about that's the motion. What actually is behind it is, I really don't know what's going on in my shop. In the sense that I probably have a lot of data, but I haven't got a way of holistically managing that data. And that data could be customer insights. So how many of the bank know who I am as a person, because I might appear in the loan system, I might appear in the credit card system, I might appear in the retail system, and the MPF system, and you have no clue. So I think that's really the fundamental. So to the point is, you have to have a top-down approach, but the top-down approach is not just coming from the CEO or COO or whoever. It's your culture. the culture of the organization needs to change is how disruptive are you to your own business? So if you're doing the same process, whether you're talking about robotics, whether you're talking about processing a loan, processing an application for a retail, a virtual bank, you don't need to go to a branch. You have to go to a branch today because I have to see your ID card. That has to go away because the process has to be streamlined. But if you're not fundamentally changing the way you're doing your business and cutting all the silos or cutting all the process away to make it more efficient and make it more digital, you cannot compete. So it's not just AI going to solve your problem. It's a holistic way of down, and data is the clue. And data has to glue everything. And because we have data, then we can apply AI. So I think we have to, kind of circle back. But the other thing I talked about is research. What you say about that. We have our research business before AI come into play. We have research for 26 years. Bill Gates started it. And at that time, we say we should be able to hear, listen, understand humans. And guess where we are talking about today? We are able to understand humans and all of that, the sentiment. So technology is always ahead of us. We're just not adopting it. But I think what we can do, and to some extent with the hackathon or whatever, is you can adopt it because no one is going to tell you AI, you're going to finish it in 1 year, in 2 years, in 5 years. It never happened. If you're looking for that crystal ball, it's not going to happen. You're going to start with something that will help your whatever domain risk you've highlighted. You can start with risk. You can start with your customer's journey. You can start with anywhere. But start with a project that actually can help you with the business value that you say, and then grow from there. That is the strategy. Not a big bang strategy, but a strategy how you can use technology to improve your business, and having the good data is your fundamental. And then you apply AI.
Huayi, wanted to come back to
I
you.
completely agree with that. So I think the proliferation of AI is mostly caused by, well, first of all, serial improvements and etc. But secondly, is all the tool sets that's available now to make people think that deep learning and AI is very accessible. So in fact, there's a lot of APIs, frameworks that you can adopt and play around and start to generate speech, text, or image recognitions, very simple. But if you want to dig into the details, you really need to be a data scientist or fully understand how AI works. Now, what this allows us to do is to have a lot of common or regular data scientists or citizen data scientists, as we call them, for people who don't fully understand what AI is, but start to explore what's behind the scenes and start to generate some really interesting stuff. So for example, TensorFlow is a very good example. You can go as deep as you need, or you can go as shallow as you need to. You can copy and paste a bunch of notebooks and start to generate your own chess playing programs and start to really read the code and fully understand what's going on. So how does that apply to us is we need the citizen data scientists to come up with things that will produce business value and exactly matching to the point. Now, what we did in the past is we analyzed data feeds, for example, the news from Thomson Reuters news. And we made a big distinction between the market psych, which is your sentiments, how the stock market is going to move against that, versus how the stock market actually moves. And using statistical methods, we find no correlation at all. And it's completely bogus. So we started, talking to our account manager, we're not going to subscribe to that. But on the other hand, once you start
Hang on, you're telling me that most of the work I've done throughout my career is of no use whatsoever?
No, let me finish this. So once we start to look at what Thomson Reuters provides is real news. So what they do is they vet it, they have the reporter going out and start to investigate, and they provide you with real news that's happening in the market, which might have already been too late because the news has already hit the market in a lot of private circles, or within social medias. So what we're now investigating is look at Twitter feeds, look at Facebook feeds, look at the unreal news, not necessarily completely untrue, but they could be true news or they could be completely false. And that actually has a bigger impact on how the stock market or even, for example, like cryptocurrency moves. But on the other hand, true news is what will have a long-term impact. The fake news are what's going to have a short-term impact. So how we do that is it's a huge amount of data processing, but it's really garbage in. On the other hand, we start to derive some results, which could be useful for the short-term tradings that we do perform. So that's one example on utilizing AI, I guess, with garbage in, by the way.
Yeah, that garbage bit wasn't the Reuters news bit, just FYI.
which is why I clarify in the beginning.
Thank you. I appreciated that.
Can I comment on the point
course.
he made? I think that is where, I mean, to your point, that the tools is available today. If you think about it, I'm not supposed to be talking about product and service. I just want to address, like you mentioned about chatbot. We can do chatbot in 15 minutes because we can take your FAQ document and you can turn it into a very smart chatbot in 15 minutes. That's the tool that's available today to allow you to do that. The other piece about the data is we actually have some tools available on machine learning. You can actually draw some correlation when you throw a lot of data on our surface, and it will tell you whether this and like have no relationship or there is some relationship, and you can play around with that. And of course, for very sophisticated, you need a data scientist. What I'm talking about is democratizing it. So some of these, whether you want to try and find any correlation or pattern, you can actually use some tools for that. So I think that's really where the technology can help you and fast track some of the agility. And that's the only point I want to address.
Pascal.
I think what I want to say is that building an AI system is not building a website. So about 15 years ago, when everybody became an e-company, they use website building tools, and it will enable you to build a website very fast, right? So there are a lot of APIs today and a lot of toolkits today, and they're deceivingly simple because building a system is not building a website, meaning that you can use all these tools. So I teach an undergraduate AI class, and I've been teaching that since I've been to UST, so for 21 years. At the beginning, the first 10 years, I had to teach them, and they had to program in C, C++. Today, they can use all kinds of APIs. They can build end-to-end systems. But what goes behind this? How do you build a chatbot? The tools do not. It enables you to build one. It's still coming from your brain. How do you design the system? How do you design the better solution? How do you design the optimal solution? Is this the right solution? And therefore, is this the right tool to use? That is not so simple. What I'm trying to say is that there's a lot of hype in the market today, and I see a lot of small startups with a couple of kids who took 6 months of online class, and they think they know AI. Unfortunately, these are the solutions and products that might bring about the AI winter, because people will be disappointed, and some of them will even do something that's not good. All right, so I want to say that for these big companies, of course, they have very good researchers and very good developers. They know what they're doing. But if you don't know what they're doing, these deceivingly simple toolkits would allow some people to do something that can be destructive. I don't mean destructive in the the end of the world scenario, but it can lead to market crash and certain things like that. So I would say be careful, and people need to know more than just online class in 6 months of online class, really. And today we're talking about in AI community, within the Partnership on AI, we're talking a lot about AI education. All right, AI education, you want to democratize AI, but it is not building a website. The way to do that is by educating the young people. Older people, it's a little bit too late. But the young people really doing more mathematics, doing more computer science, and learn from scratch. It doesn't take that long. 1 semester, as opposed to just like online class. You do the projects, you do the homeworks, but you really have to bite the bullet and learn it. So I've got students who are, they are very ambitious. They think they want to do this and that, but they're not willing to put in the hard work to actually learn the basics and the fundamentals and do the homework. Then it's not going to work. So I'm just saying that do not be deceived by this, all these toolkits. It's how to use them that counts.
Okay. All right. Question for each of you. Say you met the CEO of a mid or large company who just woke up, or maybe attended a conference on the financial future and said, "Oh my God, I need to get on top of this. And my company knows nothing about AI. I've never looked at it. I don't know where to start." How would you advise them to start looking at AI? What do they need to learn? And what do they need to hire in, bring in, cultivate within their company? Brian, I'll come to you first.
Sure, thanks, Jennifer. And it's a nice segue to follow up with Pascal's point. So when we use the API, for example, in this case, the API.ai platform, and there are lots of, so let's take a step back. Democratizing is a great thing from an awareness point of view. So we have used some of these for awareness processes. We're not saying that by using this you can build a top-rated chatbot. Far from it. But it allows more people to better understand some of the processes behind it for the next steps forward. So what I would say is as follows. So number one, but by again, sounds like a plug, it didn't mean to, but the idea behind the workshop is to gain awareness. So number one is awareness. Number two, then look internally to see what resources you have, right? Because some companies, they do have CTOs. Increasingly, they need CDOs now, Chief Data Officers, right? Increasingly, they have different BUs that saying, hey, the competitor's doing this, we want to do this too. So how do they, and then they have compliance and legal who say, hang on, wait a minute, GDPR is coming. Do you know what that means, right? And we can talk a lot about that too, right? And the right of explanation that's coming in with GDPR. So all of these factors come into spoke. So once you have, from the top-down point of view, if you understand some of the opportunities and then some of the hype, then you pull together internally, what resource do we have internally, and then what can and should we do and reach out externally, whether through academia, through external vendors, through independent sources, to help you with that journey. So in my space, we deal with a lot of startups, and that's quite linked to the hype and the reality point. And there, I'll share this little anecdote. So I once chaired a panel on AI and RegTech. And so I was in your seat there, and I had a pre-session with all the panelists, and I said, so AI and RegTech. So one, tell me, so how much AI do you have in your company, and what AI do you have? So it was kind of interesting. One of them saw black and blue, yes, we create our own algorithms, we're an AI company. And other ones as well, we're kind of exploring it, we're kind of using existing platforms, and so they're really building upon existing frameworks to build their AI platforms. And again, nothing wrong with it, but Pascal would say, well, maybe not really an AI company. And then the third one, there's a third category would say, we're not really, but it's kind of good for marketing, right? And if you speak to some venture capitalists, they say, part of the bingo is that, blockchain and AI, boom, boom, right? And that's how they're going to raise capital. So there's some that specifically added in. And then there's yet another category which kind of interesting. They say, well, we actually do have some machine learning at the back of it, but we don't market it that way. Because frankly, when we try to market it on a B2B level, B2C loves it, right? Whoa, it sounds great. But B2B, then you deal with questions about what AI we actually have and explanatory aspects, which again we can talk about as well, because the right to explain is really important from a regulatory point of view as well as from a customer point of view, and they're not really able to explain, so they almost prefer to say no, we don't have it, because otherwise it just leads to a longer procurement cycle. So it's really a very interesting mixture where the market's evolve.
Can you talk a little bit more about the explain point there? The need to be able to explain this.
Absolutely. So in AI, one of the things, when I'm in AI circles, sometimes I provocatively ask the first question. So, Zuckerberg or Musk, right? Is AI going to be the end of the world, or is it going to be the savior of the world, right? And different people may come out at different parts of the spectrum. So one of the concerns about AI is the concept of the black box. If you're creating these wonderful learning tools that can really learn from all sources of data, good or bad, right? And what sources, and within or outside of context. And then they come out with a proposal, a recommendation, a solution, a decision, right? So how do you know the decision is made? So a lot of our legal and regulatory systems are based on agency principle, right? These are individual responsible people. So if somebody made a bad credit call, we sue them, right? And we sack them. That person is responsible. But suddenly, it's this box, this algorithm that made it. So to the regulator and to internal risks and decision makers, so how do you explain to them how the decision came to be? So within the AI research community, there's focus on what they call FAT, right? Fairness, accountability, and transparency. And on the issue of transparency, the question becomes, can you explain this to your internal management, and then in the finance world, can you explain to the regulator? Because the regulator will say, okay, so you have introduced this into your system. Tell me how it works, and how did it come up to that solution, that outcome, and that recommendation? And if you can't, that's kind of a problem, right? And linked to that, and I'd love to hear your thoughts there too, Pascal. So linked to that is also, so GDPR has got a provision in there which some have called the right to explanation. And with that, it gets into the area of, and what it says is that if any EU citizen has any decision made by an algorithm, that citizen has the right to request an explanation as to how the decision was actually made. Now, there's a debate as to what that means for automation and AI, but it is something that the industry is kind of grappling with. Love to hear your thoughts, Pascal.
GDPR is why Europe is and will continue to lose to China. That's it. Because it's a half-ass, they don't understand technology and they think they do, and their instinct is to regulate. The first instinct is to regulate, not innovate. And so a lot of, I usually use this example because we discuss this a lot. Partnership on AI, that's the organization that's tasked to do this, and also on World Economic Forum. We discuss this a lot, the explainable and the transparency. And we believe there should be, I believe personally, there should be data transparency. You need to know where your data is going. At least know where, where is your data going? You're using Amazon Echo Speaker. Where is your data going? Are they recording you? Are they recording you all day long? When are they recording? This we need, consumers have the right to know because it's your personal data. And today we don't have that. So I'm proposing and we are pushing for this kind of a data flow transparency. It should be part of the standards. If you're selling AI device, there should be a certificate saying that it is safe and it's transparent, so on and so forth. Fine. But explainability is a fallacy. Why? Because I like to use the example of medical care. Right? We use drugs, we use medicines, and I don't know about you, but I have no idea about the chemical makeup of every single medicine I take. Some of them are important. I read some papers. Some of my doctors give me research papers to read. I read about, I kind of know the results, and I feel like I can trust it, but I have no idea what those components are. But why do I trust my doctor? Because they're certified. They have taken an oath. Right? They are actual medical practitioners. And also, why do I trust these drugs? Because there are FDAs, there are regulatory bodies that approve drugs and approve medicines. So what we need for AI technology today, and I agree that AI is much more sensitive than other kind of technology. So we don't worry about wireless technology or automation in other ways, but we do worry about AI. So what I think the solution should be is it's not so much a regulatory body, but it's, even if there are regulatory bodies, they need to involve more AI experts, people on Partnership on AI who actually know what the algorithms are doing. And the governments need to work with the NGOs, need to work with the policymakers, and also standard bodies together to come up with this AI safety standards and policy and so on. Instead of trigger happy, I know GDPR is just, well, I already said it at the beginning. But the instinct is not to regulate something you don't understand, right? Because you don't understand, you regulate it, then for sure you'll never get to understand it because it won't be there. So, so this is what I think. So the key is not for everybody, every citizen to understand how AI algorithms work. It's not possible, right? People have better things to do. But the key is to have such a standard in the world, and also it needs to be a global standard. It needs to be agreed upon between nations and governments, and companies need to buy in. And these standards and these certifications need to be, we need to see that. Right now we're seeing AI being released into the wild with absolutely nothing, no supervision. I'm scared because I know that these kids can use some tools and build something that's completely, could be harmful. And there's no way for us to prevent that today. And like you say, who do you sue? You don't know, right? You get into a car accident, people know exactly whom to sue, if it's the driver's fault, if it's a car engine fault, right? But AI today, we don't have that. So we need to run very fast with coming up with good standards and good policy, but not just to ban things, right? Okay.
Thank you. Why?
So I think coming from financial services industry, everyone has their favorite brokers. Well, I mean, hopefully, when you grow up. So from the past lawsuits and cases regarding algorithmic trading, so it has always been the case. The designer, the product owner, the guy who actually wrote the system is going to jail if something goes wrong, if something is proven that's unethical. Now, regulation-wise, I love regulators because they help to protect our industry. So from that perspective, we are less concerned about regulations or explainability of how our algorithm has came about. For example, using deep learning, it is difficult to explain, but we do keep logs. We do keep all the learning information. We can reproduce the results if we replay all the information that's being passed into the system. And that will be able to explain our intentions are true. It's not for the EO purpose of playing against our clients, for example. And that's exactly what the regulators are looking for. Are you doing this for your own good, or are you doing this on behalf of the client for their purposes? Are you protecting the client and the market, or are you doing this for prop trading purposes, right? So from an algorithmic trading perspective, statistical models are difficult to explain. They're extremely difficult to explain. If you get to the level of how different correlations happen, how do you calculate them, how do you create a model that's fast enough to react to a real-time market, like in the milliseconds, it's very difficult to explain. But we have been explaining that in the past to the regulators, to the clients, to a level that they will understand. And we can prove that we're not doing anything that's evil. So that's the financial service industry fact. Is now we're using AI, we're playing with AI, we're testing AI, but it's also, we can prove that we're doing things for everyone's good. Obviously for the profit of the firm as well, but not with EO intentions.
Okay. I should have said earlier, of course, that we would take questions from the floor. I've let the panel keep going because they've said such interesting stuff. Do we have any questions from the floor? Do you have questions for the panel? Please raise your hand if so. Have a think about it, and I'll come back and ask again in a minute. I mean, we're talking about separating the hype from reality, and we've been talking very much about the reality of this because there's so much to talk about. But let's look at the future. In, say, 5-10 years' time, where do you think AI will be, and where would you like to see it? Connie, I'll come to you first.
Well, as I open up, I think AI is going to disrupt every processes, every application that you're going to build. So we're going to have an AI element to everything that we do. I do believe on that. And I also think that in the future, because we also come from financial services, it's going to be not just our own financial services circle, it's going to be a whole ecosystem. And that is going to cut across all industries. So it's not going to be just us innovating, but it's going to be across. So to give you some examples, on insurance, lifestyle, healthcare is going to cross over to insurance. So you're going to do a better job in targeting your customer, not when they're sick, but to prevent them by being sick. And how do you get that? You need to get that data of the health and history and draw some patterns whether there is any symptoms of triggering a major disease. That is what we call proactive awareness, and also proactive in terms of how people are exposed to their own health. And banking is the same. I think whether you're looking at retail banking is actually very similar. And being Microsoft, we've seen many different industries being innovative. And I think a lot of that is going to happen to us as well. And so I think that's really where I see it's going to be happening. It's going to happen much faster at the speed because of the tools. I want to address an earlier question in terms of democratizing AI, because I almost forgot what the question was when we have a whole long panel discussion. But I think the one thing I would not educate a CEO when you ask me what do I go to a CEO and say about AI is to give you what's AI and what's not AI, because I don't think there are better things to do. But I think the key thing is, to the point of all the discussions, where your core competency is. Because a lot of times when you go and have a conversation with management or with a strategy or whatever you're transforming, the first thing is you have to understand where your core value is. Today, I believe the bank's core value or insurance company's core value is the algorithm. What you decide or what you actually say to your customer as a value-add service. For example, I have the data of the market going up and down. I've done all my correlation. This one has no value, no impact, but this one has. This is my algorithm because I spend a lot of time, I spend a lot of algorithm, and this is what I actually provide you as a service. Now, underpin that, that could be what I call the democracy AI. That could be things that the tools can do, but there is a sophisticated level that is only you, and you will do it with your algorithm, with all the languages you choose to do. So that's a level of sophistication there. But there's a level that you won't build yourself. I'll give you an example. If I want to do a facial recognition, will you write that code as a bank? Why? That's what I have as a service of AI. So that's the level of differences, and this is where we will have to educate our customers. This part, you can buy. This part, you build. This part, I'm sorry, you probably take you years to find the algorithm. And I like the idea because regulators are actually talking about it, and we are, as we do, we actually have a lot of discussion with regulators. So I think, to your point, what's the future is going to look like? Regulators is going to open up, and I think that's going to be a major push. I mean, you hear Shipui talked about all the good things that Hong Kong MA is doing very openly, and I think that's what we're going to see happening around the world and also in the region. And that will foster innovation because as long as you can explain and be compliant, as far as our industry is concerned, you have a lot of room to improve. And I think that's one of the hurdles before. I think that hurdle is going to slowly go away. So that's really where I see is the future, generically, not just for AI.
Great. Brian, 5-10 years from now, will all the hype of today be reality?
So I really liked how Pascal opened it up because, and Huawei and I were just talking about this before at lunch, we're like, you know, we're kind of like sci-fi nerds. And this is like everything that you thought was sci-fi is actually happening now. Now, some of it is still promises. We, as of today, now have a flying car, right? Thanks Elon Musk, right? That went up in the SpaceX rocket. But otherwise, we still don't have flying cars. But what is true is AI is so pervasive in so many different ways that we often don't think about it. It's now under the hood in so many ways. But it will be more pervasive as time comes. I think the next few years will be really quite exciting and challenging in lots of different facets. On the one hand, the applications will keep coming. It'll be the big tech companies that will keep rolling it out. And as well as their platforms, because they all want you to join their APIs as opposed to others. So let's see how that all evolves. But also in relation to the governance aspects and some of the parts I was talking about and more focused on. How are we? I think self-driving cars are the most obvious example because most people understand car. Okay, hits somebody or swerves between the trolley problem. Instead of hitting the young girl, hits the old lady, right? So who's at fault? Is that the right thing? What do you do? Most people can understand that concept. But when you talk about an algorithm making a decision whether or not to increase your premium for insurance or whether to decline your loan on the basis of different data that they gathered, including social data, perhaps social media data, right? Is that right? Is that wrong? Is it biased? Because you live in a particular district, therefore they classify you in a particular way. Race becomes an issue in places like the US, and it's much more sensitized to that. So those are pressing and very important things that we as a society need to come together. I totally agree with Pascal. It needs the experts, the domain experts, to see as in relation to that. But it also needs different parts of society. Yes, it's the lawyers too, sorry. But, but also sociologists, right? People in the social sector to think about how we're going to address some of these. So exciting times. Ask me again in 5 years.
I'll make a note of it. Pascal?
So I predict that within 5 to 10 years, not within 5 years, but between 5 to 10 years, people will stop talking about AI. So AI innovation in the labs and research will continue to go on as always been, and I think it will accelerate in the research. But in the society, AI will become part of our infrastructure, just like internet, just like big data, and people will just stop talking about it because it's going to be everywhere, and there will be new buzzwords for new applications, and there won't be a panel on AI. in this hotel within 5 to 10 years.
Maybe in 5 years' time, I'll understand AI properly too.
But AI will change. AI will evolve. It has always evolved. But it will become part of our infrastructure, of our economy, of our society, of our lives. So people won't be surprised at all when they encounter AI.
Why?
So I think Gartner published a really interesting article called the Maverick's Guide to AI. So that's their prediction for what AI is going to be in 5 years' time. Basically, we're going to be servicing AI rather than AI servicing us. So what that means is AI will take data, AI will take services that we're performing, and relatively create results that comes back to us and perform a service. So eventually, we and AI is almost our relationship with Windows 7, for example, right now, or Windows 10, apologies. So it's going to become a part of life. It just has to be. We'll be working with it. It will be working with us. And I foresee, just like what Pascal said, AI is going to disappear. It's almost like no one's talking about desktops now. Everyone just has computer. And that's a tool. That's a tool we use every day. And that's what I believe will be.
So basically what we're saying is that the hype is so going to become reality that we're talking ourselves out of a panel in a few years' time. Yeah. That sounds a pretty good way to end because we're out of time. And I just think this has been one of the most fascinating panels I've done. Anything that's covered magic to Noam Chomsky has got to be a pretty interesting way of spending an hour. So I'd just like to say thank you very much to the panelists and to the audience for listening and all being here. I think you've got a coffee break coming up now, so feel free to try and mob them and ask them more questions on the way. But guys, thank you very much. It's been great.
Thank you.